Simply putting those things together made me realize that I never, ever, ever wanted to go into real estate. And furthermore, I never, ever, ever, the last thing in the world I'm going to become is an appraiser.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast.
Minisode.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging in for another mini-sode. I want to take you through a little bit of my journey today, just briefly. Share with you kind of an interesting side note about my history, and that is my desire, or in this case, a non-desire to be an appraiser. I want to pause here and remind you that we are sponsored by ANow Software. ANow makes it easier to be not just an appraiser, but an appraisal business owner. Check them out. Go to anow.com, ANOW.com. Folks, some of you might know my history. For those of you who don't, let me just briefly tell you that I grew up in a real estate home. I grew up as the son of a real estate agent / broker, and I saw firsthand what that means. Now, my father, in many cases, worked outside the home, meaning he had an office that he worked out of, but for much of his life, he worked in a home office. The phone number for his office was the exact same phone number that we used for our residence. So that made it interesting when we answered the phone. Those were days long past, right? But my dad became a real estate appraiser later in my life. Now, not much later. I think I was a teenager when he became an appraiser. And I spent, I say I've been doing this for about 24 years, but that's just official. That was when I got my first appraiser license, was in 1996. However, I was doing appraisal work for many years previous to that. Ever since I had a driver's license, I may have driven around with a camera and taken a few pictures for my father. Of course, life was much different back then. And just kind of watching over his shoulder and seeing what he did. But you would think that, okay, if you looked at my story from the outside, you would say, okay, well, it's very obvious. Dustin is an appraiser because his dad was an appraiser. And it just makes sense that you follow, the acorn, as they say, does not fall far from the tree. Well, you would be right. I don't think if it were for my father being an appraiser that I would ever have even considered maybe this profession, unless, of course, it came to light in another way. But I think it's very obvious. I'm an appraiser because my father was an appraiser. But there's more to the story. I am also an appraiser despite the fact that my father was an appraiser. I want to explain that story when we get back from the break. But first, I want to tell you a brief story about becoming a business owner and the journey to get there. Folks, as a business owner, it's essential that you know your numbers. As a popular commercial says often on the radio, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. This is very, very true, folks. If you don't know what's going on, if you don't know the maths, as they say down under, then you don't know what's going on in your business. Well, before I had ANow Software, folks, that was a lot of time, a lot of energy, crunching numbers, looking at where we are, analyzing my numbers. ANow now does that for me. No pun intended. Thank you, ANow. ANow will take those numbers in seconds. I can click numbers, I can click buttons, and I can know exactly what's going on in my business. Folks, what would you give to know exactly what's going on in your business? Well, you should give a lot, but you don't need to. ANow is affordable. ANow is an investment in you. It's an investment in your business. Go to anow.com. Again, it's anow.com, ANOW.com. Welcome back to the program, folks. A quick mini-sode for you today, just telling briefly about my story, and simply put, I vowed I would never become an appraiser. Now, what's the story behind that? Well, folks, I love my dad. My dad is an amazing individual. He is up there in years. His health is not good, and I just love him to death. I find my time with him more and more precious. But I watched my dad struggle, and to be fair to him, it wasn't all his fault. He was an appraiser, he was a business owner, he was an agent and a broker through the 1980s. And if any of you lived through the 1980s, you know what the housing market was like throughout the country, especially in the late 80s. My father struggled financially. Now, I was too young and stupid to put all of that together, and I simply looked at that and said, well, gee, I see my dad working very hard hours. I don't know how many hours, but I would say it was very common for my dad to work 60 plus hours a week. And let's just face it, we were not very well off when I was a kid. In fact, we struggled very, very much financially, and it was hard. Now, as a kid, you're somewhat insulated from that. You're somewhat insulated from the fact that there's a struggle out there. You don't see the bills. You simply come home and eat your meals and don't know what your mom and dad had to do to get that meal on the table. But as I've gotten older and as I've gotten wiser, as they say, I start to recognize what sacrifices my parents had made. Now, despite the fact that I didn't put two and two together completely, I was still wise enough to realize that my dad worked hard and we didn't have much to show for it. And simply putting those things together made me realize that I never, ever, ever wanted to go into real estate. And furthermore, I never, ever, ever, the last thing in the world I'm going to become is an appraiser. Now, part of my success is due to the market. Part of my success is due to the fact that we live in great times, especially 2020. Okay. Now, I know that sounds crazy to say that good times are happening in 2020. There's a lot going on this year, right? That is a struggle for everyone. And I feel as one of my mastermind students recently said, I'm a little bit embarrassed that I'm so successful at a time that many people are not. But this has been a good year for appraisers. So part of it is that, and part of it is the fact that I have made business decisions that have allowed me to run a business and not simply be a technician. And folks, as I look back, first of all, shame on me for not fully understanding and giving credit to my father for the sacrifices that he made to me. Dad, I love you. I don't think you listen to this program, but I love you if you do. Number two, looking at a situation and judging it by the cover of one individual and one circumstance is just not fair. Furthermore, in my dream team, in my AllStar team, we have found ways together to work together to do things different than most appraisers do. And we do things different than most appraisers do. In the end, I love my job. I do. I love being an appraiser. There's things I don't like about it. There's days I hate it. There's days I wonder what I'm doing. There's days that I set goals to change a lot of things. But in the end, I love what I do. I love being a technician. I love being an appraiser. I love being in people's homes. I love education. I love growing. I love learning about markets. And I love being a business owner. Moral of the story, as you look at your life, as you look at your opportunities, you look at what your peers, your friends are doing. When I say peers, I'm not talking other appraisers. I'm talking about your neighbors, your friends, your family. Look at what they are doing and ask yourself, is what we do so bad? I absolutely love what I do. I absolutely love you as listeners. Thank you for joining me for this journey. Thank you for helping me to continue to grow, not just as listeners, but as people. To bind together. Folks, I am finding that the appraiser cave is disappearing, and these one-off situations are becoming less and less. We're integrated, we live in the information age, and it's great to be a part of appraisers that help each other. If you're interested in being part of that group, the AllStar team specifically, helping each other to be better business owners, to be more successful, I recommend that you join us. It is absolutely free right now. For 30 days, you can check it out and find out what it's all about. It's the AllStar team on my website, and use the coupon code FREE30AllStar. See you there.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the AllStar team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.